And there we start on a Friday evening. Live pictures of Little Chute, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are holding dueling events. I've said it before. I will say it again. Just a couple of nights ago, we said it. This race has been defined by Donald Trump, and at times been defined by Donald Trump's amazing ability to screw things up. And with that, we welcome you to the fairest network on television. If there is one thing to agree on right now, the presidential race is extremely close. Every single vote matters. Never before have we entered into the weekend before an election, and no one really has an idea which way this is going to go. The smartest people tell you they don't know, which means nobody knows. Either candidate cannot afford a mistake, even a small mistake. And they really can't afford to play into the other side's narrative. And Trump was on a roll by playing off of President Biden, calling his supporters garbage. It played right into the narrative. The Democrats have scorn and disdain for Trump supporters. It played right into Trump's hands. It was gold for Donald Trump. But instead of riding that narrative, Trump started talking about training a gun on Liz Cheney's face.
She's a war hawk. She kills people. She wanted to, even in my administration, she was pushing that we go to war with everybody. And I said, if you ever gave her a rifle and let her do the fighting, if you ever do that, she wouldn't be doing too well, I will tell you right now.
So that was this cleanup. The actual soundbite happened the night before, last night, with Tucker Carlson. And in that soundbite, he talked about that Liz Cheney is a war hawk. And he also talked about he would like to see her with a rifle staring down 9 other rifles. I'll ask the control room if we have that second, the original soundbite, which I don't think we do right now. We're going to play it here in a minute. But after talking about wanting to put rifles in Liz Cheney's faces, the media acted like kids with way too much Halloween candy.
4 days out from Election Day, and former President Donald Trump is escalating his violent rhetoric, suggesting one of his most prominent critics, the former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, should be fired upon. Of course, violent rhetoric, it's not new for Trump. But this stark imagery represents an escalation at a tense moment when the country is on edge heading into Tuesday.
It doesn't matter that Trump's words were taken out of context. It really doesn't. The same way it didn't matter that President Biden probably didn't mean to say out loud that every Trump supporter is garbage. But it plays into a narrative. What Joe Biden said about Trump supporters was devastating for Harris. It went on for days and days. Same thing here. The knock on Trump that hurts him with swing voters, and it does, we have polling on this, is that he wants to be a dictator. It's why Kamala Harris says it over and over and over again. Talk of guns and your political opponent should not be in the same zip code. Just shouldn't, especially 3 days out. It does Donald Trump absolutely no good. So Trump's exchange, yucking it up with Tucker Carlson, will dominate the news cycle for 24 hours, maybe 48. The media will take it out of context, and that is wrong. We don't do that. Well, we played the wrong soundbite, but we will have the right soundbite, and we will play the entire thing when it becomes available for you. The media is losing their mind over the possibility that Trump wins. Trump knows this, which makes what he said even dumber. It's the most dangerous time in politics, yucking it up with a friend, as he was with Tucker Carlson. There's a friendly crowd, just like when Kamala Harris was talking to the ladies of The View. All right, so we will now play for you in its entirety this soundbite from last night that started this whole mess for Donald Trump, yucking it up with Tucker Carlson, dunking, you might say, that's what the kids would say, right, on Liz Cheney.
His daughter is a very dumb individual, very dumb. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy.
So Donald Trump didn't call for Liz Cheney's execution or for her to go in front of a firing squad. Nothing like that. But he let his guard down. And that's when you are most likely to make a giant gaffe. Trump's comments about Liz Cheney were dumb and bombastic, but that's why this race is so close. Trump is ahead on the issues that matter most to voters, the economy and immigration. The race is tied because voters in swing states don't like him. Comments about Liz Cheney and training guns on Liz Cheney do not help.
In great detail, suggested rifles should be trained on former Representative Liz Cheney. This must be disqualifying. Anyone who wants to be president of the United States who uses that kind of violent rhetoric is clearly disqualified and unqualified to be president.
Newsflash, Kamala Harris does not get to decide who and who is not qualified to be the president of the United States. The voters get to decide that. But there is a group of voters who are going to decide this election who don't necessarily like when Donald Trump talks that way. NewsNation's Libby Dean live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Trump is getting ready to stake the stage, the same place, Libby, you and I were at for the Republican National Convention, the Fiserv Arena. Help us understand, are you hearing, obviously, from the Trump campaign that is attacking the media and saying everyone's taking it out of context? Is there any attempt to try and get Donald Trump back to the Donald Trump of Wednesday or Tuesday when he was on the teleprompter and driving a garbage truck?
I think the difference here is how Trump's team is reacting and how Trump himself is reacting. Leland, we were seeing this morning kind of Trump's team putting out statements, really downplaying and dismissing this, saying that the media was grabbing onto something here, that there was nothing to be held. And then he went and did that appearance in Michigan where he was asked specifically if these comments were necessary to be made about Liz Cheney. And he said, quote, oh, yeah, sure. Like, he doubled down on this. So there's kind of this disconnect from Trump's team dismissing it and then Trump himself honestly repeating some of the rhetoric that we heard last night. But as we get into these final days, as you have been mentioning throughout the whole this top hour, it's rhetoric. It's rhetoric. That's really the word that we keep hearing on the campaign trail from both sides, not just from Republicans or Democrats, and how these things are going to be clipped, but it really matters how it's going to affect turnout. Now, aside from how these things are being clipped and what the candidates are saying, it's really where the candidates are going. And we have learned here at NewsNation that Trump, this is his last rally here tonight in Wisconsin, but he's going to be in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia in the coming days.
All right. Libby Dean, as the national anthem gets underway at the Fiserv Arena. Libby, thank you very much. Chris Cillizza, senior advisor, DGA Group, author of So What? The Substack. Good to see you, my friend. We know that there are voters who are upset by this, and they're not necessarily Kamala Harris supporters. A lot of them are Donald Trump supporters who say, why does he step in it? I think the bigger question, and I think it's a reasonable question, is does the fact that the media melts down about it and takes it so far out of context, does that not help Donald Trump in some way, not only with his supporters, but there's a lot of people who don't like it when Donald Trump is vilified for something he didn't say?
Yeah, so I think two things are absolutely true here, Leland. Number one, he did not, and you played the clip, he did not call for her to be assassinated or to be shot by a firing squad. He just didn't say that. That said, what he did say is not something a public figure should say about anyone, but definitely not another public figure. So I think both of those things are true. I think your open nailed it. Donald Trump continues to do totally dumb and say totally dumb things, strategically speaking. At the same time, I think the left overreacts to things and actually makes Trump look okay on things that he shouldn't look okay on. Like, to me, you can't say, I hope Liz Cheney, or I'd like to see Liz Cheney facing down 9 rifles or whatever it was. That doesn't mean he said she should be assassinated, but you can't say that. And you certainly don't say it when Republican women are the undecided voters. Strategically, it makes zero sense. it's hard for me to construct a line other than maybe what he said in Green Bay, where he said, I'm going to keep women safe whether they want to or not. Again, women voters, Republican women, Nikki Haley voters, these are the people who are going to decide who the next president is. It's like Donald Trump is going out of his way to say things that strategically make zero sense.
Yeah, and look, you do that when you're yucking it up with your friends. In friendly confines, it's when politicians make...
We have talked about that.
The
You're
biggest
totally
mistake.
right.
Yeah, the biggest danger. And there's an irony here, right? That Liz Cheney, who the left vilified for years, if not decades, hated the Cheney family, public enemy number one, warmonger in chief. And there were a lot of people who said, hey, look, what if Dick Cheney's kids were the ones who had to go to war? We wouldn't be going to war. And now she is a hero of the revolution and of the left, only because she is now anti-Donald Trump.
Yep. Well, look, honestly, Trump's point, the point he was trying to make, take the rhetoric.
The point is a completely reasonable point, right?
Is a point, by the way, that lots of people agree with who are not Republicans, right? Like, I think the idea of these elites who send our sons and daughters into war and never do it themselves. It's easy when you're in a room and it feels like a game. It's a lot different when you have real stakes in the game. That said, the way he said it, again, gets in the way. But yes, of course, look, I think it's totally fascinating that Liz Cheney and the Bush family are now the heroes of the left. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Cindy Sheehan parked outside the Crawford Ranch protesting George W. Bush as, an evil dictator, the worst president in American history. Now he's just like a nice old guy who paints.
Yeah. Somebody, Democrats, can't we just go back to the Bush days of Republicans? Okay. This is the story.
Good old George Bush.
This is the story that got knocked off. And we said it at the top, but I think it's worth reinforcing that the scandals or kerfuffles or whatever you want to call them, or gaffes, are not nearly as big of a deal unless they play into a narrative, right? Kamala Harris saying, I'm not going to change anything. Yep. About Joe Biden, Donald Trump playing into the I'm going to be a dictator, kind of dictatory kind of rhetoric. That plays into a narrative. And then there was Joe Biden, who said unequivocally that Donald Trump supporters are garbage. Then, in one of the most clumsy cover-ups of all time, or cleanups, the White House inserted an apostrophe into the transcript, as if the transcript would make a difference compared to, of course, the tape we all saw. From the Associated Press, AP sources, White House altered record of Biden's garbage remarks despite stenographers' concerns. Perhaps the first time in history stenographer concerns have ever showed up in an AP headline. But when you have the Associated Press doing your work for you, it is bewildering to me that the Trump campaign doesn't just hit this over and over and over again. I don't get it.
It is. So it's so good that you mentioned that, Leland, because I'll tell you my own experience. Obviously, I follow this stuff really closely. Last night, I'm looking through Twitter, X, whatever. I'm scrolling through it, and I see this AP story move that basically says, the White House stenographer's office took issue with the press office changing this. That's a big deal. And they said what goes to the National Archives, which is supporters with an S, is now different than the public transcript, supporters apostrophe S. And I thought to myself, because I'm always thinking like, okay, what am I going to write? What am I going to talk about? I thought, well, I know what I'm going to talk about in the morning, meaning Friday morning. I'm going to talk about this. And do you know what less than an hour later happened? Liz Cheney, Donald Trump, she needs to pick up a rifle. I hope people don't think this is a partisan statement, because if it was the other way around, I'd say the same thing. It is mind-bogglingly stupid in the last debate campaign to step on an incredibly bad story for your opponent, which is the White House fiddled with this. They fiddled with this. According to people who work in the White House, step on that by talking about Liz Cheney. Look, it's campaign malpractice, but I don't need to actually blame the campaign, because they got smart people in the Trump campaign. Chris LaSavita, Susie Wiles, they're smart people. I blame the candidate. He cannot help himself. And if he loses an election that I believe, based on the sort of atmospherics, he should win, It is on him and his inability to just get out of his own way. It's stunning stuff.
Yeah, and the really stunning part is if he had given the answer he gave today in the cleanup, if Donald Trump had cleaned it up, just if he had given that answer last night, no problem. And you would have been talking, and a lot of people would have been talking about the fact that the White House altered the official transcript. And look, there's a lot wrong with that. I'm old enough to remember when Donald Trump kind of would pull these shenanigans in the White House. And it was a meltdown every day. This is a threat to democracy. It's an affront to the First Amendment, on and on. All right, so Liza, happy Friday night. Here we go into next week.
Here we go, my friend. I'll be there right there with you.
Okay, real quick. We're marking the tape. You got a prediction? Give me an over-under of what time Decision Desk HQ calls it.
November 10th.
Time?
5 days after.
5 days after.
November 10th. So that's a Sunday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I just made that part up. But look, I would be stunned if it, and I've been stunned many times before, so this doesn't mean it won't happen. But given what we know about the race, both internal polling and public polling, I would be stunned if November 5th or November 6th we have a winner. I really would be. I think 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th is much more likely.
That's the longest one-word answer I've gotten in at least 3 or 4 shows. Have a good night. NewsNation's election night coverage, rooted in transparency and trust. There I am. 6 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. Saliza will be there, Steyerwalt, Elizabeth Vargas, Chris Cuomo. I'll be there. Connell McShane working the big board. This will be the question of the night on Tuesday. Did women defy their husbands, and sink Donald Trump? We have the new data showing why you should not necessarily believe all the polls you see about women voters. All right, Little Chute, Wisconsin. Kamala Harris is going to be speaking there in a couple of minutes. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Trump will make his case later this evening. Republicans are giddy over data showing a big swell of early Republican voters, and it's true. Take North Carolina, for example, where Republicans have 34% of the early vote compared to 31% in 2020. And these are registered voters, registered Democrats, registered Republicans returning ballots. So we don't know who they voted for, but if you're registered for a party, you're probably voting for that party. Pennsylvania, the gap's even larger. Republicans have a 33% share of the early vote this year. In 2020, they only had 22%. A lot of buzz. And that buzz could be a chainsaw, and here's why. Pennsylvania, women represent 56% of the early vote. North Carolina, women, 55% of the early vote. And women, especially single women, especially single college-educated white women, vote overwhelmingly for Harris. With us now, Washington correspondent for the San Francisco Chronicle, Shira Stein, Notice reporter Catherine Schwartz. Ladies, good to see both of you. Thank you. I want to start with you, Shira. Trump and Harris closing arguments go hard on gendered messages. Anecdotally, I get this, that there is this concept of women defying their MAGA husbands voting for Kamala Harris rather than Donald Trump. Is there any data to support that those women actually exist in a number that matters?
It's not super clear. It really is more of a messaging campaign. We saw an ad from Julia Roberts that some Republicans are very upset about. I think what's more important that we're looking at is women tend to turn out as voters more than men do. And Donald Trump has run much of his campaign on messaging to men and especially to young men. And I'm curious to see if he can turn out those young men who don't typically get off the couch and vote. If not, he may have bet on the wrong gender.
Well, as someone who was a lazy young man myself, I can say that you have a point. The ad you're talking about by Julia Roberts was highly pointed. And you're right, it did anger a lot of Republicans because it sort of talked about women lying to their husbands or trying to celebrate women lying to their husbands. Take a look.
Your turn, honey. in the one place in America where women still have a right to choose. You can vote any way you want, and no one will ever know.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walz.
There's all sorts of tropes and subtle messages there, whatever we think of that, Catherine. But the flip side to this ad, right, is the Trump ads about Kamala Harris and boys playing on girls' sports teams and transgender surgeries. Does that sort of cancel things out with the same group, which is college-educated white women who are married, not single?
Well, when it comes to that group, I'll just say, having traveled across Pennsylvania, it's a concern I hear over and over again from Republicans. You know, canvassing in areas like the suburbs of Pittsburgh, this is a place Republicans have lost a lot of ground. I see on these apps the number of split houses of the married women who are voting Democrat and consistently have voted Democrat, and the men that are showing as solid conservative voters. So on that side, it's a very real thing. And when it comes to the transgender issue of, you know, that messaging that we've seen a real surge of both on the campaign trail at rallies and ads, it's something that's certainly driving up support among the base of white older men that Trump needs to get out in complete support if he has a chance in battleground states.
Go ahead, Cher.
It's really important to note that when Republicans have used anti-trans messaging in the past in elections, it has not worked for them. So if it works this time, I would be surprised.
Yeah, I guess the argument from Republicans would be there's a difference between anti-trans and pro-women's sports, which is it is a distinction with a difference. It may not have a different result, but there is a difference here. The flip side of all of this, right, is that Democrats have their own problem with women, which is namely Kamala Harris's billionaire surrogate, Mark Cuban, who had this to say about Trump's intelligent or non-intelligent supporters. Take a listen.
Donald Trump, you never see him around strong, intelligent women, ever. It's just that simple. They're intimidating to him. He doesn't like to be challenged by them. And, you know, Nikki Haley will call him on his nonsense with reproductive rights and how he sees and treats and talks about women.
Irony there, Mark Cuban on his private jet with the window shade drawn and the air vents overhead, telling us all about strong and intelligent women. Catherine, the messaging by the Harris campaign, especially in Pennsylvania, especially with rural, white, working class women, does it resonate in the same way it does, say, with suburban college-educated women?
Well, Democrats in these rural areas certainly would say that the Trump message isn't working here and that the Harris message is working. You know, I'm in Lancaster right now. I'm out on the campaign trail and spending time with Democrats here that are hammering that message down of Harris and abortion, specifically looking at, you know, older women. But I think, you know, when you look at the question of how effective will that be in these areas, that's a question that's yet to be seen. But, you know, that gender gap, like you talked about earlier in Pennsylvania, I mean, it's 16 points for Harris right now. So that's not just coming from suburban area.
Yeah, it's a great point. The numbers speak for themselves. Cher, I'll give you the last word here. If this does work, and this does work for Harris, what does this say going forward in terms of a gender gap widening? Is that really what we're seeing in this traditional versus progressive values campaign, that women just are far more progressive than men are?
I would question sort of the initial thing. Some of the data that we're seeing is saying that there is a wide gender gap. Most of the experts I've talked to who've been studying this for years say maybe some oversampling. I think what's really important to look at here is not necessarily progressive versus traditional, is does the messaging around abortion continue to work on a national scale? Does it work when it is a woman doing it who isn't really talking about her gender or her race very much? How much does that play into things? You know, I'm starting to think about Tuesday night. And if Harris wins, it will be having run a very, very different campaign than the last female presidential nominee, Hillary Clinton, who really relied on her gender through much of the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, look, Hillary Clinton's closing argument was it's her turn, right? Or, I'm with her, which is very different, to be fair, than Kamala Harris. Ladies, thank you both very much. Great reporting. Catherine, good luck on the trail. Shira, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, the data we've been talking about, the betting markets have swung wildly as we near the conclusion of this race. What the high rollers, millions upon millions of dollars are betting on that is moving the race towards Harris. There's one piece of data. We haven't talked about it yet. We will after the break. Pictures, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. No, those aren't the live pictures. Those are our swing state polling. These are the live pictures of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Donald Trump's set to speak later tonight in the Fiserv Arena. That's where the RNC was. That's where he showed up after getting shot. It's the same place that we all thought Joe Biden was still in the race back during the Republican National Convention, telling that Donald Trump will not be in Wisconsin again. Swing state, important swing state, and he's moving on through Michigan for closing arguments on Monday. He's also going to Virginia. Kamala Harris is starting to sound pretty optimistic these days, especially her campaign. They're putting out lots of little things. And perhaps that's with good reason. The DDHQ average of polls still shows Kamala Harris behind in 6 of the 7 swing states. Harris only leads Michigan by 0.5%. Polls are lagging indicators. The betting markets are leading indicators. 48 hours, Trump has dropped nearly 20 points in the Kalshi betting odds. He went from leading Harris by 30 points to now being ahead by just 12. With us now, Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science, Decision Desk HQ, will be our man with the numbers. The markets are getting unquestionably closer. We write about it in More Notes every day. Why?
Well, look, the betting markets, they're trying to get an edge. So they're trying to get ahead of the forecast. My job is not to get ahead of the forecast. That's not what the other forecasters do. We put the odds there. Bettors are looking for an edge. So I think that's what you're seeing is a little bit of momentum in the polling for Harris. We saw some of those battleground states that Trump is ahead in tighten over the last week or so, specifically Wisconsin, which is a key state for either candidate to win. So the betting markets are overcompensating, hoping to get an edge.
It's so amazing now to talk about the betting markets, right? Because all of a sudden, sports betting, legalized sports betting has made everybody an expert on these things. But you think about, we'll take the Kalshi odds now that are 44-56. The poly market odds are about 60-40. What does that translate, say, to a football game? Is this a field goal? Is this a touchdown? How big is the spread?
Oh, this is, well, I think it's a field goal, and maybe it's a field goal, an easy chip shot field goal. That's how close this race is. I understand 64-34. People see that big lead. But look, in Vegas all the time, people bet on worse odds than 1 in 3, and they win. And I think that's kind of where you're at with the Harris odds there. And, look, our forecast, 50-50.
So your forecast is 50-50, and the betting market is roughly 60-40, maybe 55-45. That would say that there's people who should be betting on Harris because there's a 5-point spread. You make some money there.
Yeah, you see value you see a little value, as the bettors like to say, right? And I think that's what it was, right? If we did this segment last week, we'd be talking about Trump surging in the betting markets, right? The beginning of your graphic started at him at 64. Well, he climbed there. And now I think a lot of people looked at that and they heard a couple stories about the betting markets maybe being manipulated, and it said, hey, there's some value there for Harris, especially when they started seeing a little bit of polling data tick the other way.
All right. It's kind of interesting. We looked this up. $123 million bet on the presidential race, which sounds like an awful lot of money. $123 million is a lot of money. And then you realize $23 billion is bet on the Super Bowl here. So there's sort of this wild fascination with the betting markets. Because you think if people are putting money there, it actually means anything. There is a concept about how the last minute polls matter because people want to be on the winning team, right? The undecided voters want to feel like there were other people with them. Here's Mark Halperin. Take a listen.
Obviously, I think everyone would agree you'd rather be up in public polls than down. It just creates optimism. It creates excitement. There's definitely the herd mentality that sometimes undecided voters break towards whomever they think is going to win because they want to be with the winner.
Halpern's Two-Way Show. It's a great show for political junkies. Is there something that is happening with Harris, that there is a little bit of momentum there? We don't know, won't know until next week whether it was real or not, but there's something going on.
Two things, and it's mostly news driven, right? It's the Wisconsin poll average, including our Wisconsin poll average. It is ticked back towards her. And then we've seen some early vote data out of Pennsylvania and some of the other Midwestern states that women who Harris are winning by about 10 to 11 points are turning out an early vote more than men. So those are two early indicators and why the markets are moving. Now, I'd caution, I don't know that I'd bet nearly as much money as these folks are. I think they're getting a little bit ahead of the forecast. But, you know, these markets are data-driven and they're event-driven, just like the sports markets are. Someone gets injured, they pull a lot of money. Someone looks like they're having a great week, they put a lot of money on them. I think that's how to look at these political markets.
Well, you said the magic words, that you are conservative in your estimates, in your predictions, which is why you're the man we have calling the races. Next Tuesday. It's going to be a long night, my friend. We appreciate all the work from Decision Desk HQ. And as you said, you've been planning for this election for 2 years. Here we go.
Here we go. Looking forward to it.
All right, you too. Final War Notes on Monday coming out ahead of Election Day. Warnotes.com to subscribe for free. That is our newsletter. Comes out every day at 4 p.m. Eastern. Our thoughts on the most important stories of the day. We've done a lot on the betting markets and a lot on those changes that Scott Tranter was talking about, also on social media at Leland Vittert. There are 7 swing states and only 2 presidential candidates. We have their schedules for the final days, and we will show you why there are only a couple of swing states that probably actually matter. That is the man who wants to be the senator from Wisconsin, Eric Hovde, on the stump in Milwaukee. Stump ahead of President Trump. Wisconsin's one of 7 swing states that will decide who becomes the president. Also, Donald Trump's not going to Wisconsin after tonight. We're joined by 3 top reporters now in the swing states. Mary Spacuzza, investigative reporter for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Anna Liz Nichols, reporter for the Michigan Advance. Jessica Hill, politics reporter for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Jessica, I want to start with you. 2020, Biden won Nevada by 33,000 votes. 2016, Hillary Clinton won by 27,000. Donald Trump's not going back to Nevada. Made a big swing there over the past couple of days. The polling's looked as good as it's ever looked for him in Nevada. What's changed since 2020?
What's changed the most is their messaging. Before, they were pretty much adamant about voting early or using mail ballots. This year, to kind of change from what happened in 2020, they decided to really embrace those strategies, and they encourage their voters to vote with any method possible, whether that is early voting or in person or by mail.
All right, Anna Liz, thinking about Michigan, Donald Trump is going to have his closing rally, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 10:30 on Monday night. Obviously, it's a state that he won in 2016, lost in 2020. Is Trump's strategy in Michigan enough to get him back to the 2016 numbers?
You know, we're going to find out on Election Day. It's such a lame answer.
What are you seeing right now? I mean, I've got top Democrats in Michigan telling me it is a coin flip, which means they don't feel great, because if they felt great, they'd say it was more than that. What is going to decide this race? Is it turnout? Is it the Arab vote? What are you watching?
I mean, there's a million things that could determine this election. Obviously, the Democrats are very concerned with the uncommitted movement. It represented around 100,000 votes in the state of Michigan during our primary. There have been efforts from Trump to garner some votes that maybe he didn't get in 2020 or 2016 from the Detroit area, from different parts of the state. Candidates are really scraping every corner of the state to find some voters that either haven't participated in the past or have changed their minds since 2016 or 2020.
Yeah, Kent, Macomb, Wayne County, Michigan, the places to watch. What about those counties make this so interesting?
that they flip just like the rest of the whole state does. Macomb has chosen Dem presidents and Republican presidents, so has Kent County. And then we're watching Wayne County because there are so many efforts from both candidates to win over the area, whereas it is a Democratic stronghold. But
yeah, that's the lose by less strategy, right? We saw Donald Trump in Dearborn, Michigan, a big Arab population, a place that no Republican has been in an awfully long time. Back to Nevada and Jessica. When we were out in Nevada, there was such a focus by Republicans on changing the Latino vote and driving Latino turnout for Donald Trump. Has that proven more successful over the past couple of weeks?
Remains to be seen, but there was a late Emerson College poll that came out just today, and it does show that Latinos still are favoring Harris a lot more than Trump. And then same with the Senate race here, too. Rosen is ahead with Latino voters over Sam Brown.
Is the no taxes on tips message from Donald Trump that then Kamala Harris glommed onto, is that resonating? I'm trying to figure out what the issue set is for Latino voters in Nevada that's going to change the conversation or the game.
I think it's definitely resonating with voters here. I mean, who doesn't want a little bit more money in their pocket? We have a large workforce economy, a lot of hospitality workers that really do depend on tips. They really like this plan. People that I've talked to said that it's just one part of what needs to be a bigger solution, though. They like it, but they want to see a little bit more. Some have talked about wanting to see, an increase in that minimum wage to really actually help increase even more money for them.
All right, ladies, thank you very much. Mary Spicuzza, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. We lost her signal, but we appreciate her trying to be up for us. Anna Liz Nichols, Jessica Hill, nice to see all of you. Thank you. Big week ahead. Here we go. Republicans got raked over the coals, rightly, for trying to overturn the 2020 results. The new evidence that Democrats may be looking to question this election if they lose on Tuesday. Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson on the stump ahead of Donald Trump in Milwaukee. Both campaigns claim they're going to win. I keep getting texts and emails and off the record and on background from sources saying they're going to win. They feel confident. One of them, of course, is wrong. And the loser is already planning to claim the other side cheated. Both sides have legitimate gripes. There are, of course, fake cases of voter irregularities, but then there are some very real cases. A Chinese student in Michigan faces charges for voting illegally. In Bucks County, Pennsylvania, they had to extend voting because they were shut down early. The voting was shut down early. And in Colorado, listen as the Secretary of State is pushed on her role in a voting system password leak.
This is not the first time that your office has made mistakes that have damaged voters' confidence in our elections. In 2022, your office sent out mailers to 30,000 non-citizens inviting them to register to vote. They, of course, are not eligible to register to vote. That same year, your office used Colorado's ballot tracking system to send messages to specific Coloradans encouraging them to vote when, in fact, they had already voted, causing confusion that had to be cleaned up by the county clerks. And now this leak of the voting system passwords. Given your office's repeated errors that have damaged confidence in our elections, which you say is paramount, will you resign?
Absolutely not, Kyle.
Kyle Clark, one of the real great local journalists and anchors in the country. Joining me now, Election Law Reform Initiative Manager, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Hans von Spakovsky, on what to make of all of this. Hans, Counselor, good to see you, sir. You know that old line, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean there aren't people out to get me? Right. Just because most elections and election workers are good and true people who just want to have an honest and fair election, that doesn't mean they always get it right.
No, that is correct. And the Bucks County example that you were giving is a good example of that. You know, the rule in every state is that if you are in line at the regular time that a poll closes, you get to vote. And yet at these early voting sites in Bucks County, people who were in line when it was time for the poll to close were told to go home. that was a violation of state law. Fortunately, the Trump campaign went to court and a judge said, yeah, that's a violation of the state law, and we're going to extend early voting times to make up for the mistake made by these election officials.
Yeah, the reports now, even on this extended day, that the lines in Bucks County are massive.
Right.
Before 2020, right, did we have all these problems? They just weren't so top of mind because of social media and then because of Trump's claims?
Yeah, I think that is true. Look, we maintain, for example, an election fraud database at the Heritage Foundation, and our cases go back for many years. We always have a certain amount of fraud. Is it massive? No, but we have enough of it that we need to worry about it. And occasionally it does result in an overturned election. Look, the biggest problem now is so many people are going to vote early. And the problem arises from on election day, usually in a big city, hundreds of polling places may be open, but early voting sites, they usually only have a handful of them. That's why you get such long lines at early voting locations when so many people are voting early instead of voting on election day.
Fascinating. Hans, appreciate you being with us. I'll give you the last 30 seconds. Have we seen anything yet that calls into question the integrity of the election?
Not yet, but as you know, we are encountering problems in multiple states, so we're just going to have to see what happens next Tuesday and what happens as we count the ballots.
Yeah, it's so hard sometimes to sort of distinguish fact from fiction in the moment, especially on Election Day. Hans, thank you very much. We appreciate it. That is the week for us. Hope you have a wonderful week with family, friends, people you love over this weekend. Spend some time, talk about something other than politics. There's going to be a lot of time next week for politics. I'll see you back here on Monday night. War Notes will have some thoughts. Warnotes.com to subscribe. Here's Chris.